I wasn't supposed to be home that early. My meeting in Phoenix had been scheduled for weeks. A quarterly vendor review that usually dragged for hours, followed by a dinner with clients I barely knew. But a freak rainstorm grounded their flight, and the whole thing was scrapped by noon. I should have seen it as a gift. A few extra hours to relax, beat traffic, maybe even surprise my wife with takeout and a movie. I took the long way home, actually. Stopped for gas, picked up her favorite tie from a spot near the office. I remember humming to some old rock song on the radio as I pulled into our driveway, feeling oddly light for a Thursday. A normal man, coming home to his wife a little earlier than expected. No warning, no call ahead. That feeling vanished the moment I opened the door. It wasn't anything dramatic. No loud noise, no crash, just atmosphere. Wrong. There was a smell, sweet and powdery. Something flowery, but not the kind of scent she ever wore. My wife preferred subtle, clean notes, barely their perfumes. This one lingered in the air like someone had just walked through it minutes ago. Not her. I knew that much immediately. I shut the door behind me quietly, instinctively, set the bag of food down on the table in the hallway, and just stood there, listening. The house was quiet. Too quiet. We live in a modest two-story, open floor plan, hardwood floors, no kids. Most days, even when it's silent, there's a hum. The dishwasher, a podcast from the speaker in the living room, her slippers on the tile. Today, nothing. I moved toward the kitchen. That's when I saw them, 2 wine glasses on the counter. One was drained completely, the other untouched, still half full with a deep red cab. My eyes locked onto the rim of the second glass. Lipstick. Bright, almost crimson. Emily doesn't wear red lipstick. She says it makes her look like she's trying too hard. I'm not a red lip girl, she used to tell me, especially when we were getting ready for dinners or events. She'd always go for nude tones or soft pinks. Never red. There was a napkin beside the glasses, crumpled but with a distinct scent. Cologne. Strong, masculine. Musky. I picked it up briefly, then quickly set it down, heart suddenly thudding harder. It smelled nothing like anything I owned. Before I could process more, I heard footsteps. She appeared from the hallway, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear like she always did when caught off guard. "Oh," she said, that too cheerful voice echoing in the kitchen. "You're back early." She didn't ask why. Didn't seem surprised enough for someone who wasn't expecting me for another 6 hours. Her eyes flicked briefly to the counter, then back to me, her smile staying frozen just a second too long. "Meeting got canceled," I replied casually. "Storm grounded their flight." She nodded. "Oh, that S**CKs. S**CKs? I thought. You didn't know I was coming home, and that's what you say? Who were you drinking with?" I asked, nodding toward the counter, pretending to be joking. Her smile didn't falter, but the muscles in her jaw twitched. "Oh, just Jen. She stopped by for a bit. She was driving through from Scottsdale. Didn't stay long." "Jen? Her college friend who lives in Seattle?" "She didn't text or call," I said, as lightly as I could. Emily shrugged. "Yeah, it was super last minute. She had to rush out anyway. Something about a canceled meeting or reschedule. Crazy day." I stared at her. Her arms were crossed now, posture relaxed but defensive. Her eyes dared me to question her. "Ah," I said. "Well, I brought food." "Thai?" she asked, brightening just slightly. "Yep, your usual." She stepped forward, kissed me on the cheek. Fast, impersonal, and moved toward the bags I'd set down. As she did, she brushed past the wine glasses, scooping them up quickly and rinsing them without comment. I watched her rinse out the one with lipstick first, then the other. She didn't glance my way once during the entire process. I stood there, wondering whether to press, to ask her again about Jen. About why the place smelled like someone else had just left. About the cologne, the lipstick, the silence. But I didn't. I smiled instead, helped unpack the food, and sat across from her at the table, where we made small talk about nothing. Work, traffic, weekend plans. She laughed a little too loudly at something I said. played with her noodles more than she ate them. And me? I smiled. I nodded. I played along. But inside, something had shifted. That untouched wine glass, the one with the red lipstick, never left my mind. Even hours later, as we lay in bed and she turned her back to me, I could still see it. The slight smudge, the reflection of light on the untouched rim. A perfect half-moon kiss of betrayal. And suddenly our home, the one we built, furnished, painted together, felt less like a sanctuary and more like a stage. A very carefully curated stage. And I had no idea what act I'd walked into. The next morning, I left the house before dawn, telling Emily I had a long day ahead. 2 client calls and a site visit up north. She kissed me on the cheek again, offered her usual, "Drive safe," and turned back to her phone without another word. I watched her for a moment from the doorway, that glow of her screen reflecting off her unreadable face. Then I got in the car and started driving, not north, not to any job site, just away. I needed space, time, quiet. My mind was a carousel of details, each one insignificant on its own, but together they made something undeniable. It wasn't just the wine glass or the lipstick. It was everything that came before, like puzzle pieces I'd ignored until now. The secrecy had started subtly. Emily used to leave her phone out, face up, no passcode. Now, always face down. The ringer off. She had even enabled a fingerprint lock a few months ago, said it was for security, after someone at work had their phone stolen. Made sense. At the time, I didn't question it. But then she started taking calls in other rooms. I'd walk into the kitchen and she'd suddenly go quiet, or laugh too hard at something that didn't sound funny. Once, I heard her whispering in the laundry room. When I asked who she was talking to, she said it was work stuff and changed the subject. And the second phone. God, how did I brush that off? She claimed her job gave it to her. Said it was a temporary device while they sorted out a new internal messaging platform. I'd believed her, even when I noticed she only seemed to use it at home, never at work, and it rang once. Only once, before she silenced it and shoved it into her coat pocket. Then there was yoga. Emily had always done yoga at home, online classes, half an hour, nothing fancy. But 3 months ago, she started going to a new studio across town. She raved about it. Told me it was helping her manage stress. I encouraged her, even paid for the membership. But the class schedule never matched the hours she claimed to be gone. A 60-minute class turned into 3-hour absences. Once, she came home with damp hair and a coffee from a cafe nowhere near the studio. The worst was 2 weeks ago. I was coming back from the grocery store and saw her parked down the street from our house, sitting in her car, just waiting, not on the phone, not eating, just sitting there, looking down at her lap. I pulled up beside her, thinking maybe her battery had died or she'd dropped something. She jumped, rolled down the window, smile plastered across her face. "Just checking email," she said. "Email?" Sitting in her car, a block from home, engine off? I nodded, didn't press. But that image stuck with me like a photograph etched into my memory. Now, looking back, I saw it clearly. She had been watching the house, waiting. For what or who, I still didn't know. I parked outside a quiet rest stop. K** led the engine, and stared at the dashboard. My mind wandered back to last winter. She'd planned a surprise weekend getaway for my birthday. Rented a cabin near Flagstaff, made reservations, even packed snacks for the drive. Back then, I remember thinking how lucky I was to have someone like her. Now I wondered if that version of her ever really existed. I opened my notepad app and started listing things. It felt childish, but I needed something to help me sort through the chaos. Second phone, unexplained use. Yoga trips too long for class schedule. Calls taken in laundry room, hallway. Sudden obsession with privacy. Changed wardrobe, more makeup, new bras. Smell of unfamiliar cologne, napkin. Lipstick not hers, wine glass. Parked near house, waiting. I stared at the list. My hands trembled a little as I added one final bullet. Wine glasses, one full, one empty. When you see it all together, there's no denying what it is. Not stress. Not coincidence. Not a phase. Pattern. A map. A trail of crumbs leading to something she didn't want me to find. And I knew myself well enough to know that I wouldn't rest until I followed it all the way. I didn't plan to go back home that afternoon, not really. I told Emily I'd be gone all day, dinner with a client, maybe drinks after. She didn't ask many questions. Just smiled, told me to enjoy, and reminded me to call if I stayed out late. But I couldn't stay away. I needed to see something, anything. The kind of truth that doesn't come from words or suspicions but from things left behind. Unfiltered, unguarded moments when no one thinks they're being watched. Her car wasn't in the driveway when I pulled up. The house looked the same as it always did, deceptively peaceful. I entered with the key she thought I wouldn't use until much later. The door clicked shut behind me like a secret. Inside, the air felt stale, like it had been holding its breath. I scanned the living room first. Nothing out of place. Couch cushions neatly fluffed. Throw blanket folded with surgical precision. Then the dining room. Empty, spotless, untouched. I almost walked away, until I noticed her laptop. It was sitting on the edge of the couch. Open. Alive. That alone was strange. Emily was the type to close every tab, every window, every document the second she walked away. Paranoid about privacy. But today, not even a password prompt. Just a glowing screen and a blinking cursor in the middle of an email draft. I hesitated. My reflection stared back at me from the black bezel of the screen. Then I sat down. The message wasn't long. Maybe 2 paragraphs. The recipient was listed only as JT. No name, no subject. But the words, they were enough. Last night felt like a dream. I don't know what it means that we keep doing this, but I also know I don't want to stop. I wish I could say it's just the physical part, but it's not. You listen to me, see me, in a way I haven't felt in years. Sometimes I think about telling him everything, just to stop hiding. But I can't. Not yet. I read it 3 times. Each sentence peeled away something inside me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't stress or a misread signal. This was a confession. One she hadn't meant for me to see. I didn't touch the keyboard. Didn't scroll. I just closed the screen gently, as if trying not to wake something dangerous. My hands were sweating. My breath came shallow and fast. There was a sound in my ears, like wind trapped in a tunnel, and for a second I thought I might pass out. I gripped the edge of the coffee table and waited until the storm passed. And then I stood. I moved like a ghost through the rest of the house, looking for something, anything, to tell me more. Her purse was gone. So was the second phone. In our bedroom, her vanity was neat, but her favorite perfume, the one she only wore on yoga nights, was missing from its usual place. In the bathroom trash, I found a fresh tissue dabbed with the same red lipstick I saw on the wine glass. She hadn't even bothered to bury it. I sat on the edge of our bed. The mattress still held the shape of our bodies from the night before. I stared at the floor for a long time, and in that silence, something inside me hardened. This was no longer a suspicion. This was real, tangible. It had a voice, a color, a taste. It wore perfume and used aliases. It had initials and nights and plans. It smiled across our dinner table, touched my arm, kissed my cheek on the way out the door. I was living with a stranger who wore my wife's face. That evening, I didn't tell her I was coming. I didn't tell anyone anything. Her schedule had become predictable. Meeting a client out near Cave Creek, she'd said over coffee, her tone breezy, her eyes not quite meeting mine. She wore that navy blouse, the one she claimed was too businessy for her office, and spritzed on the perfume I hadn't smelled in months. It was her new ritual for the nights I stayed home. As soon as she pulled out of the driveway, I followed. I kept 3 cars behind, just enough to stay out of her rear view. My heart thudded in a way I hadn't felt since my first job interview. Anxiety, panic, and something colder. I wasn't sure what I expected to find, only that I was done pretending I didn't see what was happening. She took the long route out of town, up the winding roads toward the north edge of the city. I'd been that way before, years ago, for a company retreat. Cabins, high-end restaurants, and pines thick enough to hide a dozen lives. Her car pulled into the gravel lot of a lakefront restaurant nestled among the trees. High windows glowed with soft amber light, and the faint sound of clinking glass drifted into the woods. I parked several rows back, behind an SUV with tinted windows. The man inside didn't move, just sat with his hands on the steering wheel, eyes fixed ahead. I made a note of him and kept walking. From the shadows near the edge of the building, I had a clear line of sight into the restaurant. And that's when I saw her. She wasn't alone. The man was already seated at a corner table, half turned toward the door as if he'd been watching for her. Gray jacket, dark hair, tall. He stood when she walked in. She smiled, her real smile, the one I hadn't seen in months, and touched his arm with practiced ease. They sat close, too close. He leaned in as she spoke, nodded like he already knew what she was going to say. She laughed at something, reached for his hand briefly, then let it go. They weren't hiding. Not really. They just didn't think anyone would be looking. And from where I stood, obscured by the reflection of lights in the glass, I might as well have been invisible. I watched them for 23 minutes. I know because I checked my watch. During that time, they never once looked uneasy or guilty. She didn't glance around. He didn't fidget. This wasn't a first date. This was routine. When the server brought wine, she raised her glass with a toast and he mirrored it, clinking the rim of hers like it was something they'd done a dozen times before. It wasn't until I turned to leave that I noticed the man in the SUV still hadn't moved. But he wasn't alone anymore. Another figure had joined him in the passenger seat. A woman this time, dressed in black, hair pulled back tight. She had something on her lap, maybe a tablet, maybe a folder. I couldn't tell. But she was watching the restaurant too. Not them. Not Emily. The whole building. I moved away quickly before they noticed me. Back in my car, I sat in the dark, trying to breathe. I felt like I was coming apart from the inside, like the last of the air had been **ked out of my lungs and replaced with ice. It wasn't just the cheating anymore. It wasn't just betrayal or heartbreak. There was something else. Something layered beneath the lies. A second rhythm under the melody of infidelity. The SUV, the stillness, the tablet, the way the woman leaned forward every time someone new entered the restaurant. They were watching too. I drove home in silence, headlights carving through the trees like knives. Every pine felt like a century. Every shadow another secret. And deep down, I knew the truth I'd uncovered tonight wasn't the whole story. It was only the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my office with the lights off, staring at the wall, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. Emily had come home late, claimed the client dinner, ran long, apologized for not texting. I told her it was fine. I smiled. I even asked if she wanted tea. She said no. Said she was tired. And just like that, she went to bed. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't stood outside a restaurant watching her toast red wine with a man whose arm she touched like it belonged to her. I didn't follow her. Didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop and started digging. I remembered a name from the email draft, JT. The initials weren't much, but it was a start. I searched our shared inbox, calendar invites, documents, anything I could cross-reference. And then I found it. An RSVP to a tech conference from 6 months ago buried in our shared Google Drive. She had listed Jason Travis as her emergency contact for travel insurance. I hadn't noticed it at the time. She told me she was attending with a group from work. A government contractor event, she said. Secure, nothing interesting. She even joked that the only thing dangerous was the buffet shrimp. Jason Travis. JT. From there, everything began to unfold. LinkedIn said he was a lead systems architect at Falcon Verge Solutions, a private defense tech contractor. Not the kind that advertised heavily. Their public-facing website was polished, vague, heavy on buzzwords. But a few PDFs buried in their investors section mentioned partnerships with the Department of Defense, advanced surveillance software, and proprietary aerospace schematics. And then I found the picture. It was from a colleague's Instagram. A group *T in Las Vegas. Poolside. Emily, 3 other people I didn't recognize, and Jason, shirtless, drink in hand, arm around her waist like they'd known each other for years. She wore a black dress she once told me had been ruined by hotel laundry. No mention of Jason. No mention of Vegas. She lied about that trip. Lied about the dress. Lied about everything. But here's what really stopped me. Her company had no business attending a defense contractor conference. She worked in logistics, high-end consumer shipping, not national security. Yet, according to her inbox, she had access to a shared folder containing schematics, prototype layouts, and NDAs referencing interagency cooperation. I opened one file, an encrypted blueprint with her name listed under Review Chain. And then another. And another. They weren't hers. She didn't have clearance. She wasn't even trained to read half of it. But the timestamps showed downloads from our home IP address. The same laptop sitting in our living room. My wife was sending confidential files to Jason Travis. Whether she knew the full extent or not, I didn't care. She was the conduit. She had used our home network, our shared bandwidth, my name on the service account. I checked our router logs. Dozens of file transfers, nighttime mostly. During her yoga hours. Same days as the wine glasses, the meetings, the new perfume. It all clicked together like a sinister puzzle I hadn't realized I was living inside. And then came the real blow. One of the NDAs wasn't signed by Emily. It was signed by me. Forged. My signature, perfect. Copied from a scan lease document we'd signed years ago. She had submitted it through a company portal. The metadata, date, time, IP tied back to my credentials. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was framing me. Whether out of carelessness or deliberate planning, I was the digital ghost in the machine. The name on the document. The IP address behind the files. The husband who helped his wife with work. I sat back in my chair, stunned. The walls of our house seemed to shift inward. This wasn't just betrayal. It was exposure. My name, my job, my freedom. All dangling over a cliff I hadn't seen coming. But I saw it now, clearer than ever. And I knew exactly what I had to do next. By the next morning, I was operating in a new mode. Silent, strategic, and sharper than I'd ever felt. I wasn't interested in revenge. I wasn't even sure I had room for anger anymore. What I needed was protection. Plan. I reached out to an old college contact, Noah, a cybersecurity consultant turned corporate security specialist. The kind of guy who thrived in gray areas and knew how to make things traceable. Or invisible. I told him everything minus the emotional details. He listened without interrupting, then said only 2 words, "Get proof." Within 48 hours, Noah had traced the digital trail from our home network to Falcon Verge's internal file system. Emily had been sending encrypted packets every week for months. The forensic report he handed me showed timestamps, file hashes, even login tokens borrowed from my credentials. "I can't prove intent," Noah said, "but I can prove access. And that's enough." It was time to move. That evening I made dinner. I cooked her favorite pasta carbonara, fresh salad, poured a deep red wine. She was suspicious at first, eyeing me over her glass like I was someone she didn't quite recognize. "You're in a good mood," she said. "Just happy to be home," I replied. And I meant it. Not in the way she thought, but because I knew this was the last night I'd ever pretend. She picked up her glass. I watched, and within minutes her hands started trembling. Not violently, not enough to raise alarms. Just a subtle drift. Eyes blinking slower, breath growing shallow. She touched her temple like she had a headache and excused herself. By the time she reached the hallway, she collapsed. I caught her before she hit the ground. I'd already called the paramedics. It wasn't poison, not really. Just a heavy sedative. Enough to mimic a fainting spell. Enough to trigger a hospital visit and, more importantly, mandatory toxicology screens. Which would raise flags. Which would bring questions. The kind of questions that bring light. Emily woke up hours later, disoriented and groggy. At the hospital, she mumbled through her answers. I stayed by her side, playing the concerned husband. But by then, the security investigation had already begun *N. Noah made sure the report landed on the right desks. Within 24 hours, compliance officers visited my office. They weren't there for Emily. They were there for me, until I handed them everything: emails, logs, forged signatures, timestamps. I didn't tell them why she'd done it. I didn't need to. The data spoke louder than motives. Emily was confronted within days. And when the threat of prosecution became real, she did what people like her always do. She folded. She made a deal. Witness cooperation. Immunity. A full statement in exchange for protection. She was gone within a week. Not arrested. Not fired. Just vanished. New name. New city. New life under federal protection. And me? I stayed. Not because I wanted to, but because someone had to clean up what she left behind. She wrote me once just one letter. No return address. No apology. Just a few paragraphs trying to explain how it started. How she felt invisible. How Jason made her feel seen. I never read past the first page. I folded the letter, stuck it in a drawer, and walked out the door with nothing but a packed bag and my car keys. No anger. No heartbreak. Just silence. And finally, peace.